Since I work as a construction foreman, I have a solid income. However, my field of work is far from ordinary. We specialize in building luxury homes for the rich elite and designing luxurious apartments for their mistresses. The challenge is not only to develop a complex and customized project, but also to meet the extravagant demands of clients who expect perfection. Each project requires meticulous planning, innovative solutions, and flawless execution, often within tight deadlines. In addition, working with such dignitaries involves strict confidentiality and the ability to navigate complex interpersonal relationships, which adds another layer of complexity to the work. Every year there is someone who wants to add another extravagant pool cottage, and I pride myself on fulfilling all of my clients' wishes with the utmost precision and perfection. Recently, after years of fulfilling other people's wishes, I decided to focus on my own. Taking a 4-month vacation, I began building a home for my wife is expecting our 3rd child, and we currently live in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment. Although we have a house, it is in dire need of major repairs. In the past, funds for such an ambitious renovation were always in short supply, and vacation savings went to other priorities. Deciding that this time everything would work out, I started saving money from my paycheck. And then I suddenly remembered that over the years I had lent considerable sums to various people, often as favors to friends and acquaintances in need. Some asked for help in emergencies. Others used the money to celebrate personal events such as weddings or starting a business. At the time, I willingly helped them in the belief that they would repay me when they could. These people I had once considered close to me, and lending them money seemed like a natural gesture of goodwill. The debts I was owed ranged from a few £100s lent to colleagues in times of need, to tens of thousands given to close friends for life-changing events such as medical emergencies or starting a business. I decided to start raising money, and after a few calls some sums were returned almost instantly. Within a week and a half, I was able to recover a significant amount, although not without frustration. During this period, my beloved wife, who has always been organized, told me that she kept meticulous notes in a notebook. This little book detailed who owed me money, how much they owed, and even the dates of transactions. It was a small miracle of order amidst the chaos of my finances. To my relief, there was only one major debtor in there, my former best friend Fergus. Years ago, I had generously loaned him nearly £1 million, a lavish wedding. We hadn't spoken for 3 years, and in that time I had almost forgotten about the loan, as well as the old grudges that had ruined our friendship. Nevertheless, it was impossible to ignore such a staggering sum of money. Determined to deal with the matter, I called Fergus early one morning. He answered somewhat clumsily and suggested that I come to his house after 7 in the evening to discuss the matter. I arrived at his place, and it was immediately clear that his financial situation was not prosperous. The house was modest, a far cry from the grand image I had envisioned for the man who had once thrown such a lavish wedding. Doubts began to creep into my head about the likelihood of repayment. I knocked on the door, but at first there was no answer. Just as I began to suspect that I had been tricked, the door creaked open and I saw Fergus's wife, Isla. She was the woman from the extravagant wedding that had cost nearly £1 million, and there was no denying her striking beauty. But her face showed confusion and fear. She invited me into the house and led me into the kitchen, where she was hurriedly preparing coffee. It was in this atmosphere that our unexpected and tense conversation unfolded. As the conversation progressed, Isla confessed that she knew nothing about the money for the wedding. Her voice shook as she spoke, and her hands nervously rubbed the edge of her sleeve. Tears came to her eyes and she lowered her gaze, clearly embarrassed and stunned. She revealed that she had always assumed that the wedding had been financed by Fergus's savings or family contributions. The realization that it was borrowed money, and borrowed from a man with whom they had lost touch, seemed to hit her, causing her to visibly stagger and apologize deeply. She admitted that while the party was grand and memorable, she was unaware that it had been financed with borrowed money. When I inquired as to how they were going to repay the debt, her answer took me by surprise. "Well, maybe I can pay with something else. We've never had that kind of money, and it will take years to save up, and you don't seem to want to wait," she said hesitantly. At first I couldn't understand what she was implying. Then Isla unbuttoned her shirt and moved closer to me, her intentions painfully clear. Surprised and confused, I hesitated for a moment before accepting her offer. After all, a debt is a debt, and it must be repaid in one form or another. And yet, as I considered the situation, an uneasy feeling came over me. Was I doing the right thing by accepting such an unconventional form of debt repayment? The power dynamics at play were undeniable, and I couldn't ignore the ethical implications of my decision. It made me question not only my own principles, but also what people are willing to do to resolve their obligations. This internal conflict lingered, adding complexity to what should have been a simple matter. Shortly after this conversation, Fergus returned home. I informed him that his debt had been reduced by almost a quarter. He looked worried, but said nothing in reply. As for Isla, we came to an agreement. She would personally work off the portion of the debt I had canceled. It was an unconventional agreement, but it seemed like the most practical solution under the circumstances. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, I felt that a solution, albeit a difficult one, had been found. Going forward, I hope to avoid similar situations by focusing on the house I intended to build for my growing family.